What's going on, guys? So it's been a while since I did an HTML and CSS project, so I put together a 4-page website to build together, and we're going to look at things like CSS positioning, Flexbox. One of the pages is going to use CSS Grid. So it's basically a creative agency website. This is the home page. You see we have this image on the side, this text over here, and we have this toggle, this menu toggle, which will toggle a full screen menu with some social media icons. We will have a tiny bit of JavaScript just to toggle the menu, but that's it. And then we have a services page. So we have these cards here. We're going to use CSS Grid to line this up. And we have a work page with these portfolio items. We're going to use Flexbox here. And we have this nice little hover effect. And then on the contact page, we have a form and we have some address info and stuff. So this is responsive. You'll see if I make this smaller, once it gets to a certain point, the image will just go away. So on mobile screens, it'll look like this. It's a little plain, but I think it looks pretty clean. And then if we go to services, you'll see everything is stacked. Work, everything is stacked. And then our contact form looks decent as well. All right, so that's it. Let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, so we're going to get started, and I would suggest following along. I think that's the best way to learn. We're going to be writing quite a bit of CSS and talking about things like Flexbox and even CSS Grid and positioning, things like that. So it's best to follow along. I'm going to have the final project here open just so we can use it as kind of a reference. And when we start to style it, I'm going to have to make this a little bigger so that I can see the desktop view. But we'll start off like this. And then I have my text editor open over here. I'm using Visual Studio Code. And of course, you can use whatever text editor you want. I have created some files and folders to kind of begin with. You can get all the code and the images and stuff in the GitHub repository link in the description. But I'll just go over it. I have an empty index HTML. We will have other other HTML pages later for our inner pages, but we'll create them when we need to. And then I have a CSS folder with a style.css, which is empty, and then a JS folder with a script.js, which is empty. And really the only JavaScript that we're going to need is to toggle this button here, to toggle the class so that we can show the navigation. All right, so and of course I have all my images here as well, and again you can get those in the link in the description. So let's start off with just creating a boilerplate. I'm going to close up the sidebar for now, and in index.html I'm just going to do exclamation enter. That's going to give me my head body tags and some meta tags. Let's change the title to, let's say, creative agency, and let's add our link to our style sheet, which is in the CSS folder /style.css. And while we're at it, we'll add the script tag down here with a source attribute to, it's in the JS folder, and then script.js. And then for now, I'm just going to put an H1 here and just say hello and save. And I have my prettier extension set up to basically format my code when I save. So if I have something way over here and I save, it's going to automatically fix that. And you can set that in your VS Code settings. So you can open this just right on your file system, or you can use an extension, which I'm using, called Live Server. So if you install that, you'll then be able to just say open with Live Server, and it should open in a new tab. And this will reload every time I save. So if I put in world and save, it's going to automatically reload. All right, so let's get rid of that H1 and let's start with our header. So basically every page is going to have a header and a section. So the section will be the main content. The header, all it's really going to have is the logo, which we're just going to have some text, and then our toggle button with the navigation. So let's go ahead and add a logo here. So just a div with a class of logo, and we'll say creative agency, and you can put an image in here if you want, and then a class of toggle. So div with a class of toggle, that's going to represent our icon, our toggle icon, and then we'll have our navigation, which is going to be everything that displays when we click this. So the links here, the social media icons, and this little email icon. So all that stuff's going to go in the navigation. So let's put a UL in here, an unordered list with a list item with a link, and this is going to go to index.html. This is going to be our home page. I'm going to copy this down. So on Mac you can do Shift Option down, on Windows Shift Alt down, and we're going to copy that down. So we have 4 of them. This next one is going to be services, and that's going to go to services HTML, which we don't have yet, but we will create it. And then let's do work.html, change this to work. And then this is going to be contact, and we'll change this to contact. So we'll save that, and now you can see we have our little logo here and our menu. Now the social icons, that's going to go outside of this UL in a div with the class of social, social-bar. And inside social bar we'll have another unordered list item, and in here we're going to have a link, and I'm just going to have this go to Facebook. Normally this would go to your Facebook page or profile, and then inside here we'll have an image, and in my images folder I have a Facebook PNG. Alright, we're probably going to want this to open up in a new tab, so let's add the target attribute and set that to _blank. Okay, and then what we'll do is take this li right here and copy this down twice, and this one here is going to be Twitter, so we'll change that and that. Okay, and then this one is going to be Instagram, so we'll change that, Instagram PNG. So if I save that, we should see our 3 icons. Now the email one is going to go outside of the UL because it's going to go down towards the bottom. So just outside that, we're going to create an A tag. I'm going to give it a class of email icon, and it's just going to go to mail to : and then whatever you want, whatever email address you want to put in the subject line of your email client. So we'll say you at email.com or whatever you want to put there. And then inside that A tag we want an image. It's going to be images/email.png, and you should see this @ sign now. Alright, so that's pretty much it for the header. Now in the section here we're going to have basically the big home image, which is going to go on the right. We're going to position it absolute, and then we have our text, our heading and paragraph. So let's add the image. So that's going to be images/home/home-image, and I'm going to give it a class of home-image. And then underneath that, let's have a div. We'll call it home content. And in here we'll have an H1. We're going to say we help to achieve, and then I'm just going to put a line break here just to put the rest of this on a new line and say your goals. And then a paragraph. I want some dummy text in here, so I'll use Emmet and just do lorem. Let's try 40. That'll give us 40 dummy text words. And then under the paragraph we'll have an A tag. I'm going to give it a class of button, and this is going to go to contact.html, and yeah, let's just say get started. Alright, so that should do it for at least the markup. Now we have to start on our CSS. So let's go to CSS and open up our style sheet, and the first thing I want to do is bring my font in that I'm going to use. So I'm just going to grab it and paste it in. So I'm importing the Poppins font from Google Fonts. So you can just copy this, or you can go to fonts.google.com, search for Poppins, and just get the import. All right, so we're going to add that. Then let's add a reset. So we're going to use the universal selector, which is an asterisk. And I just want to remove all the margin and padding from everything. So if we say margin 0, padding 0, now you can see all the space is gone. And I also want to add a box sizing property, set that to border box, so that padding doesn't affect the width of any elements or anything like that. So that's our reset. Now let's add HTML body, and this is where we're going to add our font family. We're using Poppins, so Poppins sans serif. Okay, so now our font looks much better. And also let's add the color, which is basically black, hexadecimal 111. All right, and then So we have our HTML body. Let's actually hide the navigation for now, because that's not going to show by default until we click this, and I don't want to style that just yet. So I'm going to just, for the navigation class, I'm going to display none, just to get rid of that. Okay, let's do the logo. So remember, we have this this class of logo, and I want this to be positioned absolute. So basically take it out of the regular flow of things and position it absolute, so we can give it values like, say, from the top, we're going to set it 30 pixels. That'll move it 30 pixels down. Let's set it from the left 100 pixels. That'll push it over. And then I want to change the font size. So font size, I'm going to use 2 rem. Now this is bigger than, if we look at this right here, also the spacing is different. That's because on smaller screens we're going to add a media query to change it up and make it a little smaller. You'll see when I make this bigger, then it's the same. Okay, it's a different weight, which will change now. But I think what I'm going to do is just keep this like that, and so we can style, desktop first. We can make this a little smaller, but let's go ahead and change the font weight. So font weight, I'm going to set that to let's set that to 500. So if we go back here, actually that's, what was the initial weight? Let me just check something here. Font weight's 700, not 500. All right, so we'll change the font weight to 700, and then let's also set a z-index, just so it's always on top. Basically, the higher the number, the z-index, the closer to you, or the closer to the screen it is. So we're going to set that to 10. Now, and the reason for that is because we want it to show even when we open up the menu. We don't want this, because this is going to be full screen, we don't want it covering that logo. So let's work on the section. So we have our header, which is basically this up here. Then we have our section, which is the image and then the text. And if we look at it, there's 2 direct children in the section, the image and the div with the class of home content. So I want to actually position the image to be absolute. So I want it to be over here on the right, kind of plastered to the side. I want it to stretch from the top to bottom. So let's do that. Let's add, let's say home, home image, and let's position that to be absolute. And without adding any other positioning parameters, it's gonna take this space up here. So let's set it to bottom 0, so 0 from the bottom, and then from the right 0, because we want it to be pushed to the right. Now at this point, it's going to be the same size no matter what, no matter how I resize the height of the browser. So I kind of want to have it adapt to the height. So we'll set a height of, let's do 110%. Okay, so now it'll change depending on the height of the browser. And I mean, you can change things up if you want. If something doesn't look how you want it to and you want to experiment, feel free. Everybody has a preference on what looks good. So now that's good, the image. As far as this here goes, this text, I want it to be in the middle. Now each section I'm actually going to display as a flex box so we can easily align things. So let's add, let's see, we'll go right above the logo because I'm going to style the section directly. And let's display as a flex box. And then to align this in the middle vertically, we have to first add a height onto the flex box. So let's set the height to 100 VH, which is 100 viewport heights. And what that means is it's going to take up 100 of 100 viewport height, so the entire height. And then we can use align items to center that text. Okay, so now it gets pushed to the center. Now I also want to add some padding. Let's do padding 100 pixels. Okay, so that adds some padding. Notice the words go behind the image, so we can change that by making a higher z-index on the content. So remember, that has a class of home content. So let's go right here and say home content and say z-index, set that to 10, and now it's over the image. I'm also going to set a max width because I don't want it to go that far over. Let's set it to 600 pixels. Okay. Now, if you start to bring this smaller, it actually this image is good because you can actually bring it in and it looks seamless like this right here until you start to hit the plant. So we're going to make it so the image disappears when we get to smaller screens. So don't worry about that just yet. And home content, yeah, z-index. We'll also position this relative. Okay, and then as far as the text here, I'm going to style H1s, make them a little bigger. So let's say H1, we'll set the font size to 30 pixels. And let's set, what else do we want to do to this H1? Let's change the font weight. Right now it's really bold, so let's do font weight, let's say 500. Okay, and then the paragraph, I want to add some margin to the top and bottom, and I want to do that to all paragraphs, so we'll just target it directly. We'll say margin, and then it's top right, bottom left. So top 20, let's do 20. Bottom, I'm sorry, right 0, bottom, let's do 10 pixels. Left we'll do 0. And since right and left are both 0, we don't actually need the last 0. And that'll just add some space before and after the paragraph. And then I'm actually going to make this font size a little bigger, so we'll set that to 1.1 rem. Now, as far as rem units, if you're not familiar with these, and of course I could use pixels here, but I wanted to do things where I could teach a lot in this one little project. So a rem unit is basically a multiplier of whatever the font size of the root HTML element. So by default, if we don't explicitly define a font size for this HTML element, it's 16 pixels, and that's what 1 rem is going to be because it's 16 times 1. If I were to change this to 2 rem, it would be huge. It's going to be 32 pixels. And in fact, if I show you in my Chrome tools here, and let's just select this paragraph, you'll see it does say 2 rem here, but if I go to computed, it'll show me the actual pixels right here, 32 pixels. Now, if I change the font size of the root HTML element explicitly, so if I say, font size, and we'll set that to 10 pixels, now this font size is 20 pixels. 2 rem is 20 pixels because 2 times 10 is 20. And some people will actually do this so that when they use rem units, they could just do like 1.3, and that's going to be 13, right? Because 10 times 1.3 it's going to be 13. If you do 1.7, that's going to be 17. However, I'll keep it, at 1.1 and not have this. It's still 16 pixels, and you'll see I end up with 17.6 pixels because it's 16 times 1.1. All right, so just kind of a side rant there just to get you familiar with rem units. There's also M units where it's relative to its parent font size. I have an entire video on rem and M units if you're interested. Okay, so we have the link right here, which I want to format as a button. So remember, we gave it a class of BTN. So I'm going to put that up here since it's kind of a utility class. So for the button, let's give it a red background. So we'll do background hexadecimal. Yeah, let's do hexadecimal F60, F20, and color we'll do white. Let's get rid of the underline. So text decoration none. So far it's going to look like this. We're definitely going to want to add some padding. So let's do padding 10 pixels on the top and bottom, 30 on the left and right. Let's also add, for margin, we'll do 20 pixels on the top and bottom, 0 on the left and right. Why didn't that margin? Okay, so the margin didn't work because this is a link, it's an A tag, and by default, links are displayed inline and you can't add margin to it. So let's just add display, and let's set that to inline dash block. And then I just want to add cursor pointer in case you add a form or something, you want to add that to an actual button. Okay, so that looks good. We could add a little hover effect. So if we say btn hover, you could change the color if you want. I'm going to add a transform scale, and 1 is the default, so I'm just going to scale it down to 0.98 on hover. So you just have that little effect when you hover over it. Now let's start to do the toggle button. Okay, so we want to create this red toggle button here. And remember, it's just an empty class, or I should say an empty div with a class of toggle. So let's put this, we'll go right underneath the logo. And we could actually just put some comments in here just to make this a little easier. So home, or we'll just say home page. What else we got here? Button. And we'll say base styles. Okay, so we got our button, we got our home page. This will be our navigation. Actually, the navigation I'm probably gonna put up here with the toggle, so we'll just cut that and put this here. Okay, so let's take our toggle class, and we're going to position this to be fixed, not flex. We want this to be fixed, meaning it's going to stay in the same spot all the time, no matter what, no matter if we scroll or whatever. And I want to put that on the top, so top 0, but I want it on the right, so we want it 0 from the right. Okay, if I save that, we don't see anything because remember, it's just an empty div. So let's add a width of 60 pixels and a height of also 60 pixels. And we're going to have an image. So first of all, let's add a color. So we're just going to use the background property, and we're going to use the color, this red right here. But we also want an image, so we're going to add a URL, and that is going to be up one level, so out of the CSS folder into images, and then we want menu.png. Now we still can't see it because it's actually behind the image. So we're going to give this a higher z-index. So we'll say z-index 20, and it still looks kind of weird, so we're going to add some other properties here like background size. We're going to set that to 30 pixels, and we want to set background repeat. Let's set that to no repeat, and let's also set the position. So background dash position is going to be center. And there we go, that looks pretty good. We do want this to have a cursor when I go over it, so let's add that as well. So we just want to add cursor pointer. So when we hover over it, we have our cursor. So let's see. Since we reuse this color, this red, for the button, for this and this, I think maybe we should put that into a variable, or what's known as a custom property. So in CSS, you can now have custom properties, which are basically variables. So what we'll do is go up here, and it needs to be on some kind of scope. So we're going to put it on the root scope, meaning we can use this anywhere. And the way we define these is with dash dash, and then whatever we want to call it. So I'm going to do primary dash color. And let's set that to, where is that color? So I'm just going to grab this color here and paste that in. So now we can just replace this color here. The way that we use these variables is with the var keyword, and then just pass in dash dash and then whatever the variable. So we want that there, and then we'll also put it here as well. Okay, and then that way, if you want to change the kind of the theme of the website, like let's say we just wanted to put, I don't know, steel blue, and save, now it's going to change in that area, in that spot and that spot. All right, let's actually take the border. See how there's a border on that button? I want to take that off, but let's put that color back. Yeah, so we'll say border 0. All right. So we have the close. Now I do want to make it so that when we click it, and we're going to be adding our JavaScript soon, when we click it, it's going to add the class of active onto, it's going to add it onto the navigation. It's also going to add it onto this, the toggle itself. So let's go ahead and say toggle.active. And just for right now, I'm going to go ahead and just manually add on the class of active like that, just so we can kind of see what we're doing. And we're going to change the image from the menu. So I'm going to just grab this background right here and paste that in here and change it from menu to close, which is an X. Okay, and we definitely don't want it to repeat. So let's actually just copy, let's copy all of this. And let's actually change it from 30 to 25, so it'll be a little smaller, like that. And you can use pure CSS for like the lines and stuff. You don't have to use an image, but I didn't want to, you know, complicate things even more. So I think that's fine. If that's active, it'll have an X. Now for the navigation, let's go ahead and remove the display none. That's not how we're going to do this. We're not using display none. We're basically going to position it off screen if it's not active. Okay, so it's going to have a fixed position, and what I'm talking about now at navigation is this whole area. Okay, so we want to basically position it fixed, and we want it to take up the entire screen and basically cover everything. So let's go into our navigation class and let's add a position of fixed. Okay, and then we're going to set it from the top, let's say top 0, and ultimately it's going to be left 0, but when we don't want to show it, I'm going to set left to 100%, meaning I'm pushing it off the screen 100%. But I'll show you how we'll deal with that in a second. Actually, no, let's do that now just so we can see what we're doing. So we will have a navigation dot active, and then that is going to have left 0. And just like I did with the toggle, I'm also going to add active onto the navigation manually. We're going to add it with JavaScript later, but for now we're just going to have it you know, just hard coded. So top 0, right now it's active, so it's left 0. And then let's add a width. So we want it to take up the entire screen, so a width and a height of 100%. And let's set the background. We'll set background color to white. Now it should cover everything. So let's give this a high z-index. So we'll say z-index, if we set that to 10, yeah, so it's going to cover, oh, we set this to 10, didn't we? All right, let's set it to 15. Okay, so it's going to cover that. I do want the button to show, but I also want the logo to show, which I think we also set to 10. So the logo, let's see, logo, the index set to 10. Let's set that to 20 as well. There, so the toggle and the logo are set to a 20 z-index, and then the navigation is set to 15. All right, so now that those two things are displayed, let's add, we're going to display flex, and I want everything in the middle. So let's say justify content, let's set that to the center, so that moves it over that way to the center. And then let's also do align item center, and that will move it vertically to the center. Okay, so everything is right in the middle. So the navigation itself is positioned correctly. We just need, obviously we need to fix this crap up. So let's go ahead and we'll go under the navigation active. And let's say navigation. So the UL is going to be positioned, or the ULs are going to be positioned relative. And then let's do the list items. So navigation ULLI, I want to also position relative, and I want to take away any bullet points. So let's say list style none. Get rid of those, and let's text align to the center, because we want that to be centered. And then for the links, let's see, we'll just copy that. And for the A tags or the links, let's do a font size. We're going to make these bigger. Let's do 2.2 rem. So whatever, 16 times 2.2. Let's make the color 111. Let's get rid of the underline. So text decoration none. And let's set the font weight to something lighter. Let's do 300. All right, and then when we hover over it, we're going to have that red color. So let's say navigation ULLIA hover, and then we'll set the color of that to our variable. So -- primary color. So if I hover over these, they should be red. Now the social bar, obviously we don't want to have this stuff here. We want it to be over on the left. So let's go right here, and we'll say navigation social bar, and we're going to position that to be absolute. Okay, we don't want it there though. Let's put it from the top 0 and from the left 0, and I'm going to add a width of 60 pixels, and let's add a height of 100%. And I want it to be centered, so we'll display this as a flex box, and let's justify content center and also align items center. So if we save that, now you can see it's over here on the side. Now the email icon isn't part of that social bar, or actually, let's see. So it is part of the div, but it's not part of the UL. So the email icon, I'm actually going to position that to the bottom. So let's say navigation and then email icon, and we're going to position that absolute, and let's make it from the bottom 20 pixels, and let's do a transform scale, and we're going to scale it down half like that. And I also want these to be scaled down as well, so let's do the social bar links. Okay, so for this, let's go ahead and let's display these as inline block, and then let's also scale that down. So transform, scale it down to 0.5. All right, so I think that looks pretty good. Now, if we don't have the active class on both the toggle and the navigation, then it's going to be in the default state like this. So all we have to do now with our JavaScript is make it so that when we click this, so we'll add an event, so when we click that, it adds the class of active to those two elements. So pretty simple. So let's jump into our script.js here. And basically all we have to do is bring in the toggle, right? So we'll create a variable called toggle. And even if you don't know any JavaScript at all, this is pretty easy to understand. So let's say document.query selector, and that just allows us to select something from the DOM, the document object model, which you can think of as like all your HTML tags, everything that is used to create this document. And we want to grab the class of toggle. So you can put any selector you want in here, an ID, a class, a straight up element, whatever. So we're going to select that. And then we're also going to select the navigation. Those are the two things we want to add to basically toggle the class with. So this is going to be query selector, and then we're going to use dot navigation. Okay, so we brought those two things in. Now we're going to take the toggle that we brought in, and we want to add an event listener onto it. We want to listen for a click event, and then if we click on it, we're going to run a function. This is an arrow function I'm putting in here. It's a shorthand for doing this function like that, which we could do, but arrow functions are just what I prefer, and they're neater looking. So we're just going to go ahead and do that. So basically when we click it, something's going to happen. What we want to happen is to take the toggle, and we want to, and when I say the toggle, I mean this red thing up here. I want to add the class. Well, I want to toggle it. If it doesn't have the class of active, I want to add it. If it does have it, I want to remove it. So we can do that in JavaScript. We can say .ClassList. We get access to the class list and a bunch of methods to do certain things like add a class or remove, but we want toggle. Maybe we should have called it something different. That looks kind of weird. Just know that this is a method or a function on the class list object. This is just the toggle that we brought in. It's the button, this thing here. All right, so we want to toggle the class of active. So just doing that, if I save and I click, you can see it turns to an X because it's adding and removing that active class. In fact, we can see that if we look at, let's select this. So you can see right now, this div with the class of toggle does not have the active. If I click it, it gets added, right? It gets added because it didn't have it. Now that it has it, if I click it, it goes away. So it just toggles that class. Now we just want to do the same exact thing for the navigation. So let's just copy this down, and let's just change this right here. Instead of toggle, we're taking the navigation and toggling the active class. So let's click, and there we go. So it's as simple as that. That's all the JavaScript that we have to add, so we can actually close that up. And we're going to make this a little bigger because we are going to be creating other HTML pages, and I want to be able to see what we're doing. I think there's a little too many words here. If we look at the other version, yeah, I think we have one less line. So let's actually delete just some of the dummy text. Let's see, what if we get rid of that? Yeah, so I think that looks a little better. Now, this isn't really responsive because it goes over the image. In fact, we can open up the dev tools and see what it looks like on a mobile screen. So this would be iPhone 6, 7, 8, and you can change this. So that would be an iPhone X. But I'm actually not going to use this because I'm going to just make this smaller like that. And then let's go to our style sheet, and we're going to go to the bottom here and add our media query. So to create a media query, we just say @media, and in here we can say either max or min width. I'm going to say max width 10. Let's do 1068 pixels, and then anything I put in here is only going to apply if it's under that that width. So I want to take the home image, and I want to display none if we're under that width. And you can see the image goes right away. If I go wider, then the image shows up. So on a phone or a tablet, even an iPad Pro at this width, it should just show no image. Now, I also want to, let's see, the logo doesn't look right. I want to put that up here and also make it a little smaller. So let's say logo, and let's move the positioning. So it's already positioned absolute. I'm just going to set the top to 10 pixels rather than, I think it was 30 pixels. So that'll move it up. And then let's set it from the left. Let's do 40 pixels. That'll move it over. And then let's set the font size, which is 2.2 rem, I think I set it to. So let's set that to 1.5 rem. And that looks better. Okay, and then let's see. So we have our H1 here. There's a little too much padding around this. This is the, what is this, the home? No, this is just the section. So let's add section, and I think we had 100 all the way around. I want to keep, let's just do 100 top and bottom, but change it to 40 on the left and right. Yeah, there we go. So now it reaches out further on smaller screens and it doesn't look as weird. All right. Now the navigation, let's take a look at that. These are kind of big, so I think we should make those a little smaller as well. So let's say navigation, we want ULLIA, so we're targeting the links here. Let's set the font size. I think it's 2.5 by default, so let's do 2 rem. Yeah, just shrink those down a little bit. All right, good. So that should do it as far as the home page goes. So now let's start on the services page. So I'm going to create a new HTML file called services.html. Now obviously we're going to have like the same header and everything, so I'm going to copy everything from the index. Let's close that up, and in services we'll paste this in, and let's just clear out the entire section. So we want to keep the header, but we'll clear out everything that's in the section, and we should now be able to link to services.html and just have kind of an empty slate, empty page to work with. Now in the section here, we're going to have a div with the class of title, and in the title we'll have an h1, let's say services that we can help you with. And then underneath the h1, let's have a paragraph. We'll do lorem, let's do lorem 50. So we'll save that. It's going to look like that for now. And I guess, yeah, let's just do the HTML. There's some stuff in the CSS that's going to make it look weird, but we'll get to that after. Basically, we're just going to have, of course I can just show you, we're going to have the title, which wraps around this. That's the class of title. And then we want these cards, or whatever you want to call them, these different services, and we're going to use CSS Grid to lay these out. So let's add those services. So under this div, we're going to have a class of services, and then each one of those cards is going to be a class called service. And in that service, we're going to have a class of icon, and in that we'll have an image with the icon. This one's going to be images/001.png. And then outside of the icon div, let's put an h2. We'll say design, and then let's say lorem 20. Might have to change that if it doesn't look good, but that's basically a service, right? Now we do have an issue here, and that is the section. If we look at our styling, let's go up to where our section is, we displayed flex, and by default display flex gives you a flex row, which is horizontal. So any elements that we add in here, any direct children of section, are going to be in a horizontal row. Now that's fine for the home page, but not for the inner pages. We want it to go down in a column. So what I'm going to do here, and I could just, and if I change this right here, let's say flex, you can easily change it to a column like that. Okay, and that's the orientation I want. If we go back to the home page, it doesn't look right. So what we'll do to fix this is on the index on the home page where we have our section, let's just add a class of home. And there's obviously a bunch of different ways you could that you could handle this, but we're going to just add a class of home, and let's go right under section, and let's say section.home. So if it has the class of home, then we're going to set the flex direction back to row. So if I save that now, it goes back to normal. Now I also want to have some margin on the section for every inner page to push this down right here. So if I set margin top to 60 pixels. That's what I want here. Now on the home page, I don't want that, so I'm just going to set the home section margin, say margin top, to 0, so that doesn't affect the home page. But I do want it on all the intersections. All right, so now that we have that taken care of, let's go back to services and let's add the rest of these services. We'll handle the CSS after, but I'll just go ahead and copy this div of service. And I think we have 6, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And let's see, where's the first one? So this is the first one. The second one, let's change the icon to 2, and the service is going to be development. Okay, and then let's see, this one is going to be 3, and the service is going to be SEO. Okay, let's go down here. This one is going to be 4, and the service is going to be marketing. This one here will be 5, and the service will be app development, which, I mean, I guess is the same as development, but it doesn't really matter. It's just dummy content. And then this one here, 6, this will be error fixing. Okay, and that should do it for the content itself. Now, this doesn't look very good, so we do have to style this. So let's go into our style sheet here, and we're going to want to go, let's go down right above the media query. Let's see, so that's our home page style. So let's go under that and let's say services page, and services, so the services class itself, which wraps around all of the individual cards. Let's add a margin top of 40 pixels, and I'm going to display that as a grid. So what that means is this right here, this div of services, it wraps around all of the individual services. We're going to make this a grid, so each service is going to be a grid item. Now, just doing that doesn't actually change the layout. We need to define our columns. So to do that, I'm going to use a property called grid-template-columns, and here we can define basically how wide each column should be and how many columns we want. Let's say we wanted 50%. We could say 50% for the first one, 50% for the second, and that's what it gives us. So CSS Grid is really, really powerful. If we wanted one to be bigger than the other, we could do 70% for the first one, 30% for that one. Okay, so now we have 70-30. Now I want them to be, I want to have 3 that are all even, so I'm going to use FR units or fractions. So 1 FR, and I want 3 of them. If I just do that, it's going to put them all in one row or one column. So I want 3, so I'm going to do 1 FR, 1 FR, 1 FR. And now it gives me 3. Okay, 3 columns. Now a cleaner way to do this is to use repeat, and I could say repeat 3 times 1 FR. That's going to give me the same thing. And don't worry about these icons. I'm going to make these smaller in a minute. But I do want to have some gap in between. See how close these are together? So with grid, we can actually use, it used to be grid gap, which still works, but you can just do gap now. And I'm going to give it a 40 pixel gap. So now it'll have space in between, both vertically and horizontally. And then I also want to just align everything to the center. So let's say text align to the center. Okay, let's take care of those icons real quick. So we'll say services, and then we'll target service, because each icon is in a class called service, and then a class icon, and then the image. And let's make that, let's say max with 100 pixels. Okay, so that's going to shrink those down. And again, you could use font awesome icons if you'd like. We're just using images in this case. Now I do want to add a little bit of padding to each service. So let's say services dot service, which is the individual card. And if you want to try borders and background colors and stuff like that, you can. I'm going to set 30 pixels padding on that. Like you could do a background of light gray. You know, if you like that kind of look, that's fine. But I'm not going to do that. What I do want to do is have a hover effect. So let's say services.service and then hover. And on hover, I'm going to add a box shadow. So box shadow, let's do 0, 10 pixels, 30 pixels, and then the color, let's do RGBA, which is red, green, blue, alpha. We're going to do black with 0.1 for the transparency. So now when I hover over, we get that little shadow effect. All right, now for the H2s, I believe. Did we have these H2s? Yeah, so each one of these services has an H2. I want to style that. So let's go right here and say services service H2. Let's make the font size 24 pixels and let's make the font weight 500. And we're going to add a little margin top. So 20 pixels, and let's do color. So color, I'm going to do hexadecimal value 1B206E. Like that. All right, so I don't think, yeah, that looks pretty good. And then let's see, I think that's it. Yeah, so that doesn't look too bad. Now as far as responsiveness, whoops, okay, that's really big. So that doesn't look very good, the columns here. I don't want to keep 3. I don't want to keep 3 columns. I actually want to have 2 when I hit that 1068, and then 1 when I hit, you know, really small screens. So to do that, let's go down here. Now remember, what made these columns is this, the grid template columns. So I'll just copy this whole services, and then in our media query here, so you want to make sure you're within this media query, and just paste that in and get rid of everything except the grid template columns because all this stuff is already applied. And I'm just going to change 3 to 2. So if I save that now, whoops, didn't mean to do that. Let's go back down here. So now if I go back, you'll see we're less than 1068, so it turns to 2. When I'm more than 1068, it's 3. Now if I get down to here, like really small, I want it to be just 1. So what I can do is add another media query. Let's say media, we'll say max width. This time let's do 768 pixels. And I'm just simply going to take this, put that here, and I don't need to do any repeat. I just need 1 column, so 1 FR. And now that looks nice and neat. All right, so we have the home page and the services page done, and they're both responsive. So now let's go to create a new file here, new HTML file, and this one's going to be called work.html. And once again, we can just copy. Let's close up, let's close index, and let's copy services. So everything in services we'll copy, we'll put that into work, and let's just clear out in the section here. I want to clear out everything except the title area. So let's see. Yeah, so this div right here of title, whoops. Basically, I just want to have the heading. Yeah, we just want to have that. So obviously we want to change the text here though. So the H1, let's say some of our finest work. Now if we go to work, we should see this. Now I just want to have kind of a bunch of portfolio items, and we're going to use Flex for this just to kind of change things up. Again, I'm trying to just use different things to show you examples. If you want to use all CSS grid or all Flex or something like, I mean, that's absolutely fine. It's all preference. So if you want to change things up, you can do that. So under the div class of title, right here, still within the section, let's create a class of portfolio. And we're basically just going to have a bunch of items. So we'll give these the class of item. And in the item, we'll have an image. So this is going to be images slash portfolio item 1. We actually have 16 of these things. So under the image, let's have a class of action, because we're going to have a little hover effect where if we hover over it, we have this link here. It's not going to go anywhere, but we'll have this link that says launch. Okay, so if I save that, it's going to look like crap to begin with, but we'll style it in a little bit. Now, like I said, we're going to have 16 of these things, so let's grab this, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So now we have 16, but we do want to change up the images. So let's see, we have 1, and they're just ordered like this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. And of course you could use all the same image, but I wanted to make it look decent. So that's it for the HTML. Pretty simple. Now we need to style it. So let's go under, let's make sure we go outside of our media query. And this is going to be the work page. And what I'm going to do here is set the portfolio. So portfolio wraps around all the items. So I want to display the portfolio as a flex box. And as soon as I do that, all of the items are going to be in a row. So they're all going horizontal now. You see I have the scroll bar, they go all the way over. Now what I want them to do is wrap if they start to go out of the container. So we can set flex wrap and just set that to wrap. And there we go. So now if I make this bigger, you'll see if it can fit the next one, it will. And then it'll shrink down, down again. So that's kind of what we want to happen, although I want to make these, smaller. So over here, let's say portfolio and take each item and make the width, let's do 300 pixels, and let's do a height of 300 pixels as well. Now the image is going to kind of break out of that. We'll take care of that in a second. I just want to also set the position to relative, because we are going to do the action where we hover over it and it gives us that launch button. So that's going to be absolute positioned within this relative item. And then I also just want to add a margin of 5 pixels around each one. Now for the image, let's say portfolio item image. We want that to just take up the whole container of 300 pixels. So let's set the width to the image to 100% and also the height to 100%. Okay, so now it fills the container. We have 5 pixels in between each one, and if it'll fit, it'll come in like that. And it doesn't matter how big or small. Now let's do the hover effect. Actually, one thing I want to do is just add margin top right here to the portfolio just to push it down a little bit. Now for the hover, if we look at the item, it has the image, but then it also has this div with the class of action that has launch. So that, let's go down here, let's add that. So portfolio item, and then we want to target action, action, and we want to position this to be absolute. So it's positioned absolute within the item, that's positioned relative. And we want to say from the top 0, left 0, we want it to stretch all the way across the item. So 100%, height 100%. And let's add a background of RGBA, which is red, green, blue, alpha. We want black. and then the transparency or the alpha value will be 0.8. So right now you can see it's covering all of them, and this will only show on hover, but for now we're going to see it, you know, at all times. So that takes care of kind of the overlay. Now for the text inside, let's go ahead and set this to display flex, and let's set justify content to center and also align items to center. So that'll move the launch to the middle. And let's see, we're going to have this opacity be 0, which will make it go away. And then on hover, we want it to show. But just for now, I'm going to keep it opacity 1 just so we can see what we're doing. We can make this a little smaller. Now for the link here, we obviously want to style that. So let's say portfolio item, and it's going to be, it's not on the link hover, it's going to be on the item hover, but we're styling the link on that item hover. So let's display, let's say inline block, let's do color white. Let's take away the underline, so text decoration none. So if I save that, we should see, wait a minute, what did I do? I did this wrong. So item action, we didn't do the hover yet. All right, so that looks all right. Now I do want to give it kind of a border. So let's do 1 pixel border, solid white, and we want to add some padding. So let's do 5 top and bottom, 15 left and right. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And like I said, we only want this to show on hover, so let's take this and let's say on hover, we want the action to then be opacity 1, and we want it to be 0 to begin with. So now if I hover over it, we get that launch. Now see how it just kind of flickers in? It doesn't have any kind of transition. So I want it to have a fade in transition. So we can just add transition, and then however long we want it to take, we'll say 0.3 seconds, or let's do 0.5 seconds. And then we have that hover effect. Now if on small screens this isn't aligned to the center, we could put that in a media query, or we could just do it in general. Let's see, if we just add to portfolio, which is our flex box, if we add justify content to the center, that'll push everything into the center. Let's see how it looks. Yeah, I guess we could deal with that. If you want it centered on large screens like this, you can do this, or you can move that justify content center to the media query so that it's only on smaller screens. It's up to you. And then one thing I wanted to do that I forgot is on small screens on services, I wanted to have this border just permanently. Right now we only have it on hover. So let's grab this and copy it. Let's go down here. And I'm just going to have it on service in general, not just on hover. So if we save now, they have that border. And you could have it on bigger screens as well, but I'm just going to have it like that. So the last page we have to do is the contact page. Let's go ahead and create contact.html. And we'll just copy work, I guess. Everything we have in work, we'll grab that. Paste that in here, and let's get rid of everything except the title inside the section. Get rid of that. I think we have, let me just check the contact page here. Yeah, so we have this little title area. So let's change this to contact us. And now we should be able to go to contact, and we'll see that. We'll actually make this a little smaller, a little shorter. All right, so now we want to create our contact form. So we have a form, we also have a little info area. So let's go, let's see, so we have our title. Let's go under this div with the class of title, and let's create a class of contact. And in here we're going to have, first of all, our contact dash form, and this is going to be a form. Let's get rid of the action, and let's create a class of row. So basically we're going to have rows of inputs. The first one, or the first two rows, are going to have two inputs that are 50-50 in length. So let's give this div a class of input 50, and let's put an input in here, type of text, and we'll give it a placeholder, and we'll say first name. So we're just going to use, it's not the best practice, but we're going to use placeholders as our titles, or labels I should say. And this is going to look really bad until we style it, so just bear with me. Let's make this a little bigger so we can see everything. So we have our first name, then let's take this input 50, copy it down, and this will be our last name. And then let's do another row with 50, so we can grab this and copy that down. So we have this one here is going to be email, and then this will be subject. Okay, so we'll save that. Again, it's going to look really crappy for now, but then we're going to have a message area. So this row right here, we want to go directly under that and put another row, and then this will be a div with the class of input 100 because it's going to take up 100%. The other ones are 50%. And this will be a text area, and we don't really need any of this. So let's do, yeah, we'll just get rid of all this because we're going to style it with CSS. So let's give this a class, not a class, I'm sorry, a placeholder. So placeholder, this is going to be message. Okay, and then we're going to have another row, and inside here we'll do another input 100, and this is going to be our submit button. So let's say input, and we'll do the type of submit, and the value will say send. Okay, so that's our form. Now we want to go under the contact form div, which ends right here, still within contact, and here we want to create contact, not font, contact dash info. And inside here we're going to have a couple info boxes. So let's create a class of info dash box, and in this info box we're going to have an image. Source is going to be images slash address, and then we're also going to give this a class. Let's give it a class of contact dash icon. And then we're going to have a div with the class of details, and in details we'll have an h4 that says address, and underneath that we'll have a paragraph with our address. So we'll say 28 Neon Tower, New York City, USA. So that's our address. Then we're going to have another info box. So I'm going to just copy this div right here. We're going to have 3 total, so 2, 3. And the second one here, let's change the image from address to email. And then details, it's going to be email. And then here we're going to have, let's get rid of that. Let's put an A tag here with a mail to. Let's say anyone at example.com, and in here we'll say anyone example.com. We'll just copy that down. So we're going to have 2 email addresses. This last one here is going to be our phone number, or our call. So let's change the icon to call. Change this to call. And let's add here. Actually, we can put a link here with a number. Let's do tell, and we'll do plus 1-978-555-555-5. And inside here, let's say plus 1-978, and I'll just copy that down. We'll change this one to that. All right, so that should do it. Again, this is not going to look good, so we're going to just style this real quick. Let's go over to Style CSS. Make sure you're above the media query. And let's start with the just contact class. Put a comment here, contact. This is a long video. So contact, we're going to go ahead and position this relative, and let's set the width to 100%. Let's add a margin top of 50 pixels, push it down a bit. We're going to display flex and justify the content, and we're going to use space between here. So you can see that this is displayed as a flex box, so it put it in a row. So the two items are the form and the info, and it justified the content by putting any remaining space in between the two items. Okay, and then we want to align items to flex start, which will put it, this way. It's going to align it to the top. So that's a row. Good. So now the contact form. So contact dash form. Let's position that relative, and then let's add a background of F. We're going to do light gray, so F9 3 times. I can make this a little smaller. And you can see the gray background there. Now I want this to extend all the way. So if I go ahead and say width 100%, we could do that, but I'm actually going to use calc here. So with CSS, we can use calc, and we can have calculations like, let's say 100%, but take away 400 pixels. And then what we'll do is make this side not 400, because I do want some space here. We'll make it 350. So let's see. We also want to add some padding. Let's do padding 60 pixels, 40 pixels, 20 pixels. Okay, so add some space inside of the box here. And then the form itself, I want to be 100% across. So let's say contact form, and let's set that width to 100%. Okay, and we're going to set the inputs. I'm going to fix those too in a second, but let's add the row. So we have contact form, and then we have our class of row. That we're also going to want to 100%, and we're actually going to display flex. And here you can see we have our inputs now side by side. Remember, there's a row around these two, this one, and then the button. Now for the input 50, we want that to take up 50%. So let's say contact form, and then we have a class of input 50. And for that, let's add a width of 50%. And let's do a margin of 0 top and bottom, 10 left and right. Okay, so that splits that up. We'll do the input styling in a second, but let's just do the 100 now. So we'll just copy that, and let's do input 100. And the only difference here is it's going to be 100%. Yeah, so now let's do the input and the text area. So I'm going to go, let's just go right here. Let's say contact form, and we want to style, let's say, the row input and also the contact form row text area. So we'll position relative, and let's take away the border. So we'll say border 0. Actually, we'll make this, we're going to have this responsive, so don't worry about that just yet. But let's say border 0, and then we're going to do border, not border 0, border 1 pixel solid, and let's do RGBA black, so 0, 0, 0, and then 0.2. All right, so that's our border. Let's do color 111. And background, so background I'm going to set to transparent. Okay, so now it's not a white background for the inputs. Let's set the width to be 100%. Oops. So now they're taking up 100% of their containers. Let's do 10 pixels padding. And I should probably stretch this back out so you can see, because it's gonna change when we hit 1068. But that's how it looks so far. So we have our padding. Let's set outline. I don't want to have any kind of outline, so let's set that to none, like when we're focused in it. And then font size we're going to set to 16 pixels. Let's set the font weight to 300. And let's set a margin of 10 pixels and 0, spread them apart. And resize, I'm going to set that to none. I don't want to be able to resize the text area. All right, so that doesn't look too bad. Now the text area obviously is going to be, it is, has more height, but I'm going to add even more. So let's say contact form, we'll do row text area, and let's set that height to 150 pixels. And then I just want to add some style for the button here. I'm going to make it blue and add a couple other things. So let's say contact form, and we want to specify, let's say row, and then we have input, and we're going to target the type, so the input type of submit, because that's the type that has. And then let's add a background. We'll say background color, and background color for this is going to be hexadecimal value 1B206E. Okay, and we'll make the color white, text color white. Let's also say margin 0. And I want to make it uppercase, so let's use text transform and set that to uppercase. And I want to just space out the letters a little bit, so we're going to use letter spacing, and we'll do 2 pixels for that. Okay, and then let's set the font weight on that to 600, and let's set border to 0. And let's also we'll do cursor pointer for that as well. Actually, let's do a lighter font weight. Let's try 300. All right, good. So now we need to do this side, the contact info, and we should be all set. So let's add contact-info, and we're going to set the width of that to 350 pixels. Let's give it the same background, so F9, like that. And let's also add some padding. We'll do 60 pixels top, 40 pixels left and right, and 20 bottom. And then we have the info boxes. So each one, there's 3 info boxes in here. So let's say contact info and then info dash box. So for the info box, we're going to display flex. Okay, now as soon as I do that, they're going to align horizontal. So I want to align the items flex start, and then let's add margin bottom 40 pixels. Okay, the icons are really big, so I just want to take care of those real quick. So let's say contact dash info dash box, and then I believe we called it contact icon is the div that surrounds the image. So for that, let's do width of 20 pixels, and let's do margin dash right to give it some space. We'll do 40 pixels, like that. Okay, so let's see. We have contact info or info box. So we have the details. Contact info details. Let's make this a little bigger. And might as well stay consistent here and add info dash box details. And I want to style the H4, so let's grab that. And let's add a color. So we're going to use the color hexadecimal value 1B206E. So it has that blue color. We could probably add that as a variable. I believe we have this. Is it the same color here? Yeah, it is. So we could put this into a variable or a custom style, a custom property, sorry. Let's call this secondary dash color. And then we can replace, we even have it for our services H2, so we can replace this var dash dash secondary color, and then let's copy that and let's put it right here for our submit, and put it right here for the H4. All right, so we have the red as our primary, the blue for the secondary. And then these links here, I just want these to be black. So we could just take, let's take that and say details. Let's do paragraph and details links color 111. All right, so I don't think that looks too bad. Now, on smaller screens, that doesn't look very good, so let's figure that out. We'll go down to our 1068 media query down to the bottom here, and let's change the contact. So contact form is, or contact rather, is a flex box, right? It has these 2 items in it and they're in a row. So I want to change that flex direction to a column so that they stack on top of each other. Now that obviously doesn't look good, so let's take the contact form, and I'm going to want to take the width and set that to 100%, so that goes all the way across. And then I'm going to change up the padding to 30 pixels, 30 pixels, 20 pixels. Okay, so that looks good on, like tablets and stuff like that. But if we keep going down, these should be one row, right? Instead of, or 100% instead of 50-50. So let's do contact form row, and we're going to set that flex direction to column. Okay, so now they're all stacked, but we do want them to go all the way across, even if it's input 50, because this one is input 100, that goes all the way across, but the 50s are only 50%. So let's say contact form class input, we'll say input 50 and input 100. We're going to set the width to 100% and set the margin to 0. Okay, so there we go. And I mean, you could put this down here if you only want them to stack on 768 or less, but I think that's fine. It's up to you. So the info, this right here, let's say contact dash info, and I'm going to set the width of that to 100%. Right now I think it's 350, so we'll set that to 100%. Let's move it down a little bit because it's stuck to the other one now. So we'll say margin top, set that to 20 pixels to kind of separate them out a bit, and then padding, let's do same thing, 30, 30, 20. All right, cool. So we could definitely just test this out with the device toolbar here. So if we click that, this is an iPhone 10. And that's the contact page, home page. Home page is very, very simple on mobile screens, but it does look clean. We have our services, we have our work, our portfolio, and contact. Good. And iPad, we can check that out as well. Services, work, home. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this project. I know it was pretty long. Again, feel free to use this on your portfolio or add to it, do what you want with it. That's absolutely fine. Links in the description for the code, and that's it. Thanks for watching, guys.